Welcome to another edition of Dollars and Cents, a money and finance podcast here on the Leighton Media Podcast Network. I am Jason Melillo, and as always, we are joined by our good friends from Altra Federal Credit Union here in Winona. Danielle Anderson is with us. She is a AVP Financial Wellness and Youth Strategies expert over at Altra Federal Credit Union. And Danielle, this is one that is right in your wheelhouse this week because April is Financial Literacy Month. What is that exactly? Just explain briefly what that is.
Yeah, so across the nation, lots of different places celebrate Financial Literacy Month, just all the different things that are available, usmint.gov, the Federal Reserve. They really just celebrate different things that they put out there, and it's all April long. So lots of different resources to take advantage of, and then we celebrate in our offices by offering different resources as well.
How important is it for kids, for young people to start learning some financial literacy at a pretty young age?
It's super important. You know, the earlier that they can get introduced to those types of concepts, the better. Something as simple as what is a penny, what is a dollar, and how is that earned? That can start as young as they show interest. I have a 7-year-old at home and a 4-year-old that love to learn about money and want to know how to earn it and what they can do.
How important is it, you know, you have a 7-year-old and 4-year-old, you say you're out shopping with them and you pay, you know, with cash and like, you know, they're saying, okay, you know, you could like talk to them about, okay, this is 50 cents. I gave the person $1. They're giving me 50 cents back. Is it important to sort of, you know, relate those kind of lessons to kids?
Absolutely. You know, I know in society we don't use a ton of cash anymore, but it's still very important because it is still around. You can take your kids to the store, like you said, and they can pick out a toy. And if it's $13.99, you explain to them that there is tax, you know, depending on which state you're in and what you're purchasing. But, you know, it might be a little bit more than that sticker price. And when they get to the register, so that they're not you know, overwhelmed by that, like, well, I thought I had enough money. And then knowing that if you give the cashier $15, what that change might look like,
right.
Which can be very confusing for some kids. They might not understand that I gave you this money, but where is it going and what is it doing? And I think that that's the value that really needs to be taught, especially at that young age, or just exchanging money. You know, if I give you 5 $1 bills and you gave me a 5, it's the same amount of money.
Sure.
That's one of the things that I think that the youngers really have a hard time understanding. I know the first time I tried to introduce that to my son, he was like, but I gave you more money than you just gave me. I gave you 5 and you gave me 1. And it's like, no, it's the same amount of money. So just, you know, those simple concepts like that.
Yeah. Yeah, I can remember with my younger daughter trying to introduce the concept of 4 quarters making $1, you know, and she said, well, I had 4 and they're heavy and they're metal, you know, how can this one little single piece of paper, a $1 bill be the same? And so that was kind of hard. Yeah. And so, and also, you know, never too early, unfortunately, to introduce kids to sales tax and the concept of that. So we have to do that. Some programs that you guys offer that can help, and then there are a lot of resources out there, right, online and those kind of things. Can you tell us about some of those?
Yeah. So as I mentioned, you know, we use a lot of mint.gov, uscurrency.gov when we're talking to kids about that kind of money. Again, explaining those quarters, the dollars. There's also some resources on Fed Reserve. The different states have, the different Federal Reserves have different resources that they use. We also have Bonsai, which starts as young as 7, and just introduces kids to set up a lemonade stand and how you have to go buy product and then how much do you sell that for if you want to make some money. And then we have Zogo, which is an app. It's free and it just introduces really, I would say, 16 plus to different concepts from savings accounts to investing. I think there's even modules on cryptocurrency. So a wide range of different topics that are out there.
And can this extend into kids, you know, perhaps as they get older, as a parent opens a bank account for them to understand about savings and, you know, if they have a job, okay, you know, I'm making $100, I'm going to put 50 in the bank, I'm going to keep 50. Can it kind of, you know, segue into that as they get older?
Yeah, definitely. So we introduce the concept of save, spend, share with our, as young as 7, with our moon jars, and just kind of teaching that you can divide the money however you want. We typically say 70% into spend, 20% into save, 10% into share. But again, you can do it however you want to do. And trying to teach the concept that, like you said, if you have $100, how do you want to save that? We're not telling you that you need to save 100% of that and not go have fun, but to kind of know the limits. And are you saving up for college? Maybe you're saving up for a car,
right?
Or something as simple as a toy that you want to go purchase. And how long is it going to take for you to save if you save X amount of money each week from an allowance or a paycheck or something like that?
Yeah, but I think so important to start teaching that concept young, because we see a lot of adults, as people grow up, a lot of people get into debt. So maybe learning those concepts early is so important just for fiscal and financial responsibility as you get older, And I see on your notes here that a lot of these, websites and some of these other financial tools are mobile kind of things. How much of that is the future of these kind of things? Some of these mobile apps that are going to give people some kind of a financial resource.
I think it is the future.
Yeah.
I mean, it's here, I hate to admit it, but I'm on my phone all the time.
Yeah.
And when I see my kids on it, it frustrates me, but I'm like, that's where everything is.
Yeah.
That's how they're learning today. And I think that it is such a great tool as long as it's the right tools. It's, for example, our Zogo app. You go in there and they make it fun because you earn gift cards while you're learning.
Right.
Our bonsai program is for all ages. So you're learning on a computer and you're going at your own pace. We also offer the bonsai program for classrooms. And that program is, again, online, but it's in a classroom setting. So I think that the fact that it's mobile, you can take it with you. I was just in a hotel last week for a conference, and I was sitting on the Zogo app playing. So, I'm just sitting there. I've got 10 minutes to kill before my next session starts, and that's what I pulled up. And it's very cool that they've gamified the learning aspect about money and finances, because it is such a taboo topic. And thinking about some parents aren't comfortable having that conversation with their children. Whether it be they just didn't learn those concepts and they don't know how to talk about it, or maybe they don't want to share information with their kids about their own situation. And so I think that having a mobile app is so much, it's where the kids want to be and where they're at, and to be able to bring that to them where they are is important.
Yeah, that's interesting. If somebody maybe, didn't get that kind of financial literacy when they were younger, or aren't, are embarrassed about their financial situation, it might be kind of hard for them to teach their kids too. Absolutely. Yeah, that's an interesting part of it too. Danielle Anderson is our guest from Altra Federal Credit Union. We are talking about Financial Literacy Month. That is this April. And so we're just talking about different concepts to introduce your kids to financial responsibility as they get older. Really never too young to do that. As more things go online, Danielle, we hear all the time, like a lot of these apps we're talking about are mobile apps, people on their phones, a lot of people banking pretty much exclusively online now. When do we start teaching kids about fraud, about, things like that? Because, that's obviously a growing problem with people doing so much stuff online. Do we start educating them about that, what to look for, red flags, that kind of thing?
Yeah, definitely. So again, that's another thing that I don't think is ever too early to start teaching them. Obviously, you want to make sure that you're explaining it in terms at the age level that's appropriate. Right. You don't want to scare them. But I think a bare minimum is when they get that checking account, or if they start doing anything online with any online activity, you need to start teaching them about things to look for. We're constantly talking about phishing scams where look for language that maybe doesn't quite make sense, or spelling errors. Text messages. Were you expecting those types of text messages? I've been getting a lot of them lately where it's, you have a package to pick up. And I didn't order a package, so no, I'm not going to click that link. Yeah. And I think sometimes curiosity gets the better of you, because you think, well, maybe something did come, then I just forgot about it. But I think it's important, especially at that young age, to say, if you have a debit card, make sure that you're looking at that online banking account, that you're making sure that purchases aren't going through that you're not aware of. And I know not many people keep, a pen and paper register anymore. It is all online.
Yeah.
But I think that that's also a benefit because it shows up so much quicker than it used to, so you can catch it earlier.
Yeah. I remember, when I was a kid, I think sometimes the schools would actually take a class to the bank. If we'd physically go to the bank and they would teach us about certain things. Are some of these, apps and these other online resources, have they sort of maybe taken the place of that? Can they kind of give us some of those basic concepts, even when a kid is, say, like elementary school aged or something like that?
Yeah, I definitely think so. I don't think it necessarily takes the place, because there's something about when you're young and you're going into a financial and you see it for the first time that it's almost that wow factor where you start learning about that stuff. And I think the online is just a hand-in-hand tool with it.
Okay.
But yes, I do think that because so much is done online now, that more of it is gearing towards that, but I don't know that it would ever go away from that wow factor that you get, especially at that elementary age level.
Yeah, there's something about actually taking that physical trip and being in the bank building and all that kind of thing. Yeah, for sure. So we talked about, at a certain age, or you said never too early to start teaching some of these financial concepts to kids, but you said, cash is being used less and less, right? So as we are in this sort of ongoing financial education of our kids, when is kind of the right age, or around the right age to say introducing them to paying bills online, or, all of the, say, financial parts of a mortgage or something like that, some of these more complicated, financial things that we do? Is there a certain age where we can start to introduce those things maybe incrementally?
Yeah, I would say it really depends on the level of comfort of the person that's teaching. Again, if it's a parent that is willing to share what they pay or introduce them, maybe it's family budgeting night or something like that. You can start early and just say, this is what I paid for a mortgage. Or if you don't want to tell them exactly what it is, just letting them know that we don't live in this house for free. There is something that goes along with it.
Right.
So those basic concepts, and then building on that throughout. Is that as early as middle school? Again, I think it's on the level of the person that is actually doing the teaching. But I do know that a lot of personal finance classes in high school start teaching those kinds of things. And I do think that that's an appropriate level, because they're going to be out on their own soon. They're going to be paying for rent. They're going to have to know what goes into that rent. We don't get electricity and heat for free and all of that kind of stuff. So again, if it's a family budgeting night, start off simple, and then as they get older, grow into that. And I do think that the high school level, again, where they're getting those personal finance classes, is very important to bring that back home, not just in the classroom setting, but to say, let's apply what you've learned here to what I actually do at home and pay my bills on.
Right. Yeah, because kids who are in high school now, they might never write a paper check in their life, right? I mean, they will probably do everything financially online, maybe with a few exceptions. But that's definitely the way it's going for sure. So as kids get older and they progress, when is kind of the time for, if parents are kind of doing that in conjunction with their kids, is there a certain time to just completely let go of that and let them go out on their own? Or does it depend, again, like you were just saying, on, kind of the level of comfortability?
Yeah, I think it, again, is level of comfortability. I know kids that are in high school and have jobs and do a lot of stuff on their own. They're paying their own auto insurance, or maybe they're paying their own automobile payments, things like that. So again, I think it really just depends on the situation and what they might be doing. If they're a kid who, maybe all season sport athlete and they don't have a job, they might not have that financial responsibility, but it's still okay to teach them about it. Knowing that, if they turn 18 and they're going to leave the home, they need to be prepared for that kind of stuff. And again, maybe their car's paid off, maybe mom and dad are helping pay for insurance, things like that, but what about gas? Are they going to have to pay for that? Or are they moving into their first apartment, and are they going to be moving in with a roommate, and how are you splitting bills?
Right.
So again, I do think that high school level, once they get a job, they're getting that paycheck. They should know taxes are coming out, what is that money going for, things like that, that it's not, I get $7 an hour, $15 an hour, and that's going to be what my paycheck
is. Yeah. And, I have a banking app on my phone. And so a lot of times I'll do mobile deposits.
Mm-hmm.
And when my younger daughter was like 9 or 10, I guess, I started having her help me do that. Like she would take the picture of the check, and then she would hit deposit and things like that. And it was on the phone, which she does a lot of fun stuff on the phone, but then it just opened up that conversation of, okay, this is actually going into your account. And then I would go and show her the account and show, the deposit is pending, So I think it's really important we utilize some of those online systems, and that kind of gets into the kid's head and it gets the wheels turning, right?
Yep. And I think that, the age you mentioned is probably that perfect age, because I sit there and I think if I were to show that to my 4-year-old, she would just be pushing
right.
buttons.
She'd think it was a game or
or
something. Yeah.
She wouldn't understand that it's going somewhere housed for her. But at 9 or 10, they start to recognize that, okay, especially if you've taken them into a financial already, and they start to recognize that. I think of kids that come in and turn all their coin in.
Yeah.
And they, they have this giant bucket and they put it in the coin machine and it counts it all up and it spits out a receipt, and it's like, but where did that money go?
Right.
I didn't get anything back for it.
Right.
So, again, teaching that concept that there's different ways to deposit money. You don't have to give physical cash to a teller to put into an account anymore.
Yeah. And I'll transfer sometimes money like from my account I have savings accounts for both of my daughters, and they'll compare like I have more than you or you have more than me and things like that. And it's just fun, but I think you walk that fine line of saying like this is online. It's just, nothing serious, but then you let them know this is actual money. This is cash, it could be cash. It's just online. So you need to pay attention to it in that way. Danielle Anderson is our guest. She works with youth strategies at Altra Federal Credit Union. We're just talking about kids and financial responsibility and introducing them to how to be just fiscally responsible as they get older. Financial Literacy Month is this April, so we're talking about that here on the Dollars and Cents podcast. Danielle, I think we'll wrap it up there. Anything else that we missed that you want to mention?
I just want to reiterate that, Altra has a lot of great resources, especially for families that want to teach their kids these things, but maybe don't know where to start. Our website is a great place to do that. We have a section called Financial Wellness, and there's different places that you can go under there for families, for students of all different ages. But we really just want to help make sure that the community is financially responsible, that we're putting something out there that will resonate with them, and we hope that our programs do. And obviously we hope that you're a member of Altra, but you don't have to be to use those resources, which I think makes it even better.
Yeah. And, we should say, too, we're talking about kids and financial literacy right now on this program. It's never too early to start, but it's never too late to start either.
Exactly.
If people feel like they are maybe, not having the best financial, plan, even if they're older, even if they're, grown-ups, even if they have jobs, whatever it might be, they can contact you guys, and it's never too late to start. It's never too late to have a plan and make a plan, right?
And we have financial coaches on staff that are more than willing to walk through with anybody on if they want to build a budget, if they want to build credit, different things like that. And I think that's one of the great things that we can give back to the community with our resources and the knowledge that our staff has.
Danielle, thank you so much for coming in. Appreciate it.
Of course.
We will see you next time. That is Danielle Anderson. She is with Altra Federal Credit Union. We're talking about Financial Literacy Month, which is this April, and just some of the resources that Altra has for kids and really anybody here in our community to make a financial plan and be fiscally responsible. That will do it for this edition of Dollars and Cents here on the Leighton Media Podcast Network. We will see you next time. Thanks for listening.